What happens when a hands-on CEO goes undercover to wash dishes at his own cafe and sees a sick employee being told to suck it up by the manager? Preston Keller had built his cafe chain from scratch 11 stores strong now. It started with a dusty corner spot and a second-hand espresso machine, and 10 years later, it was a recognizable name in the city. But lately, emails from his customer service team had started feeling off. Shorter replies, more complaints, and worst of all, employee turnover at locations that used to feel like family. He'd tried asking his district managers. Nothing serious, they said. Just the usual growing pains. But Preston couldn't shake the feeling something was slipping. So he made a decision. He picked Store 7, a mid-sized cafe near downtown, one of the newer ones, but already with a higher staff turnover than any of the others. He'd never personally met the team there, and being a corporate chain now, most of the workers had no idea what he looked like. He stayed behind the scenes, boardrooms, logistics, supplier deals, never the floor anymore. He shaved off his beard, dyed his graying sideburns, and swapped his usual button-ups for a plain polo and jeans. A fake name tag, Paul, trainee dishwasher. He applied through a temp agency they had used before, got approved. No one questioned a thing. His first shift started on a rainy Tuesday morning. The cafe buzzed with the usual mix of exhausted students and quick grab office types. Preston stepped into the back, where the dish station was already stacked high with mugs and plates. A tall woman with a clipboard barely looked at him. "You're the new temp?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, drying his hands on his jeans. "Paul, just here for the week." "Fine, I'm Kendra. I'm the manager. Don't touch anything unless I tell you." "We're short today, so hustle." She turned and walked off before he could answer. The back kitchen was cramped, hot, and loud. The dish sink steamed. A young guy with a nose ring and a name tag that said Sean showed him how to load the racks. "Welcome to the trenches," Sean said with a tired grin. "Just keep your head down. It's not always like this." Preston worked the next few hours scrubbing, rinsing, loading trays into the washer. Sweat ran down his back. The pace was brutal. By lunch rush, the cafe was packed. Orders came in nonstop. Plates clattered. Someone shouted from the front, "I need those mugs now!" Sean winced and pushed a tray through. Then he leaned over the sink and coughed hard. "You good?" Preston asked. Sean shook his head. "I think I've got something, fever, but I couldn't get anyone to cover." He rubbed his eyes. "I asked Kendra if I could leave earlier. She said if I clock out, I lose hours for the whole week." Preston stared at him. "What?" "She said if I can stand, I can wash dishes." Her words. Preston gritted his teeth. He looked over toward Kendra, who was barking at a barista for missing a drive-thru order. Sean coughed again, turning away. Preston's stomach twisted. The kid looked pale, sweat beaded on his forehead in a way that wasn't from the heat. "What if you infect someone?" Preston asked. Sean gave a bitter laugh. "Not her problem, apparently." Preston watched as Kendra walked past them again, eyes scanning the kitchen like a hawk. She saw Sean leaning on the sink. "Sean, if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean." Sean straightened, eyes wide, but didn't say anything. Preston couldn't stay quiet. "Hey," he said, "he's sick. He needs to go home." Kendra didn't even look at Preston. "You're the temp, right? Then stay in your lane. I run this store." "No one should be working like this," Preston said, chest tight. Kendra stepped closer, voice low. "You want to keep your 2-day gig? Keep washing." She walked off again. Preston stared down at the dirty dishes. His hands were trembling, not from the water. He didn't know what was worse, the way she treated Sean, or the fact that no one around looked surprised. As he loaded another tray, a barista passed by and whispered, "Don't cross her. She's fired people for less." Preston nodded, but inside, something snapped. This wasn't just one bad day. This was a pattern. And he was going to tear the whole thing apart brick by brick. By Wednesday morning, Preston had barely slept. He couldn't stop thinking about the way Kendra had dismissed Sean's condition like it was an inconvenience, not a risk. He'd built this company on the idea that people came first. It was never supposed to be like this. But now, it felt like he was staring at something he hadn't created, something that had grown out of sight, twisted and rigid. He arrived early before the store opened, slipping through the back entrance like the rest of the morning prep crew. The air in the kitchen was heavy with burnt toast and cleaning chemicals. A different barista, a quiet woman with short hair and headphones, nodded at him and went back to prepping syrups. Kendra arrived 10 minutes later, coffee in hand, sunglasses still on. She didn't speak to anyone until she'd finished checking her phone. "Paul," she said without looking up, "you'll be running cleanup again today. I don't want to find another stack like yesterday's." Preston didn't answer. He just nodded and walked to the sink. 10 minutes into his shift, Sean shuffled in again, face even paler than the day before. His steps were off like he was walking through deep water. He coughed into his sleeve and reached for gloves. "You're still here?" Preston asked, keeping his voice low. Sean nodded, eyes down. "Kendra said if I call out again, I can forget getting a reference for the bakery job I applied for. She knows the manager." Preston stared at him. "She's holding that over you?" Sean didn't answer. He just started rinsing trays. Preston turned back to the dishes, his hands working on autopilot while his mind reeled. He couldn't say anything yet. Not until he understood the full scope of what was going on. One manager like Kendra was bad enough, but if this was systemic, if people like her were being promoted because they hit numbers and ignored the human cost, he needed to know how deep it went. The morning rush came in hard. A group of tourists clogged the counter. A regular from the insurance office across the street complained about the wait. A new hire on the register fumbled with the POS system, and Kendra hovered behind her like a hawk. "You double-charged again," Kendra snapped. "Do it one more time, and you're off register for good." "I'm trying," the girl whispered, flustered. She looked no older than 19. "Trying doesn't pay for inventory," Kendra replied, then turned on her heel and walked off. The girl's hands trembled as she keyed in the next order. Preston didn't know her name. Her tag just said, "Training." He caught her glancing at the clock between customers, lips pressed tight. The hours dragged. Preston watched the patterns. Kendra only helped when the owner of the connected hair salon came in. Then she smiled, offered free samples, even comped a latte. The moment the woman left, Kendra's face shifted back to stone. The only time she stepped into the kitchen was to criticize. She never lifted a tray, never restocked a bin, never wiped down a table. She moved like she was above it all, floating just high enough to avoid the mess. By late afternoon, the new girl on register was nearly in tears. Preston saw her walk to the back, muttering something about needing a bathroom break. Kendra intercepted her near the staff hallway. "You've already had 2 breaks today," Kendra said. "I haven't eaten anything since 6, the girl replied. "I just need 5 minutes. Then eat faster tomorrow. You get 15 minutes a shift. You've used yours." The girl looked like she might argue. Then she glanced around, saw no one backing her up, and just nodded. Preston stepped forward. "She's hungry," he said. "Let her eat." Kendra turned. "You don't get to make calls here. You're a temp. Stay out of it." "I've worked in food service before," he said, "and I've never seen someone punished for needing to eat." Kendra stepped closer, her voice ice cold. "You want to lose this shift too?" Preston didn't move. "No, I just want to see people treated like people." She stared at him for a long second, then walked off without replying. That night, Preston clocked out late. He waited until everyone else had left, then circled around to the alley behind the store. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Get me their full employee file," he said. "I want the turnover numbers from the last 8 months, and I want to know how many complaints came through HR from this location." The next morning, he was assigned to trash duty. Bags had piled up behind the kitchen, and the dumpster out back was full. He hauled one bag after another across the slick pavement, slipping once when a broken lid caught his foot. He heard laughter behind him. 2 baristas on break watched from the alley door. "New guy's not gonna last," one of them said. "Bet he's gone by Friday." Preston ignored them. But what struck him wasn't the comment, it was the way they said it. Not cruel, not mocking, just resigned, like they'd seen it happen a dozen times before. Inside, a different kind of chaos was unfolding. The espresso machine jammed mid-rush. The shift lead, a guy named Mateo, was scrambling to fix it while still calling out orders. Kendra was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the manager?" Preston asked, stepping toward the counter. "Office," Mateo muttered, twisting a wrench under the back panel. She said not to bother her. Customers were backing up. Drinks were delayed. One woman asked for a refund and left. Another knocked over a tray in frustration. Preston walked to the office. The door was closed. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again, harder. Finally, it opened a crack. Kendra stood there, phone in hand, earbuds still in. "We've got a line out the door," Preston said. She looked at him like he was a fly on her window. "Then Mateo should manage better. You're the store manager, and you're the dishwasher. Go do your job." She shut the door. Preston stood there for a moment, stunned. Then he turned and walked back to the counter. Mateo was still fixing the machine. "I can pour drip," Preston said. "You call drinks, I'll handle cups." Mateo looked at him. "You know how?" "Trust me." They moved fast. Preston poured, capped, and passed drinks as fast as Mateo called them. The line started to move again. The baristas looked surprised, but they followed his lead. Within 20 minutes, the cafe was under control again. When Kendra finally emerged, she didn't say a word about the rush. She just walked to the register and started reviewing receipts. "Good job managing that," Preston said quietly to Mateo. He gave a tired shrug. Someone had to. That night, Preston watched the security footage from the last 2 weeks. Pulled remotely from the store's system, he saw Kendra sitting in the office for hours at a time. He saw employees covering for each other, picking up slack. He saw Sean working through visibly worsening symptoms, never once offered relief. And he saw the new girl, her name was Talia, being corrected so harshly, she flinched every time someone spoke near her. He checked the HR records. 6 complaints from staff in the last 4 months, all marked addressed, no follow-ups. 3 employees had quit without notice in the last 2 weeks alone. He closed his laptop. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be wearing the Paul tag. Tomorrow, the truth would come to the floor. Preston arrived alone, without a name tag, without gloves, without the apron he'd worn the last few days. It was just before opening. The rain had stopped overnight, but the sky still hung low and gray over the city. He stood outside Store 7's glass doors, watching the lights flicker on inside one by one. Kendra had not yet arrived. Mateo unlocked the front a few minutes later. As soon as he saw Preston, his eyes narrowed in confusion. "Wait, you're not scheduled." "I'm not here for a shift," Preston said. Mateo looked over his shoulder, then back. "You're corporate, aren't you?" "Yeah," Preston said. "I'm the owner." Mateo stepped back like he'd just been hit with cold air. "You're Preston Keller?" "Yes." The shift lead's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't say anything else. Preston walked past him, heading straight for the office. He didn't need to announce anything yet, not until the rest of the team was in. Not until Kendra arrived. By 7:15, most of the staff had trickled in. Sean wasn't among them. Mateo explained he'd called out that morning, finally too sick to stand. No one had covered his shift, so dishes were already backing up. Talia stood by the pastry case, arms crossed tight, avoiding eye contact. The girl looked like she hadn't slept. Kendra arrived at 7:22, sunglasses on again, still holding her phone. She didn't see Preston at first. She walked in, past Mateo without a word, and went straight to the back to hang up her coat. Preston waited until she rounded the corner. Then he followed her into the narrow hallway by the office. She turned at the sound of his steps, eyebrows raising in recognition. "You're not on the schedule today," she said. "Who let you in?" "I did," Preston said, her mouth twisted. "Look, I don't care how many shifts you picked up this week. You don't just... I'm Preston Keller," she blinked. He didn't give her time to speak. "I own this company, and I've spent the last 3 days working in your store, watching how you run it, hearing how you speak to people, and what I've seen is unacceptable." The air between them turned sharp and still. She laughed once, short and flat. "You're serious?" "Yes." You can't just show up pretending to be staff. You lied to get in here." "I did, because clearly no one at the top was getting the truth." She straightened. "Whatever you think you saw, I saw enough." He stepped past her and opened the office door. "We're doing this now, in front of the team." She followed, slower. Preston stood near the front register while the rest of the staff gathered, some still tying aprons or sipping early coffee. Mateo stood stiffly near the bar. Talia lingered behind the pastry case, eyes moving between Preston and Kendra. "I need everyone's attention," Preston said. "My name is Preston Keller. I'm the founder of this company. This week, I've been working here undercover to understand what's been happening in this location." No one moved. Someone dropped a spoon in the back. "I've watched people push past exhaustion. I've seen sick workers denied rest. I've seen employees threatened over minor mistakes. And I've seen a manager who hides in the office while her team holds the store together." Kendra stepped forward. "This is completely out of line. You don't know what it takes to manage a location like this. You think you can judge a store based on a few dish shifts?" Preston turned to her. "No, I'm judging it based on your actions. You denied a visibly ill employee the right to go home. You threatened another with retaliation over a reference. You humiliated a new hire during rush. And you ignored a broken espresso system while customers waited for 30 minutes. Kendra's eyes darted around the room. "You're blowing everything out of proportion. I've hit every sales target this quarter. My numbers are clean. I run tight because I have to." "This isn't tight. It's toxic." She opened her mouth to speak again, but he cut across her. "You're relieved of your position effective immediately." The room went still. "You're firing me?" she said. "Yes." "This is ridiculous. I've been here since opening day. I've trained 3 full teams. I've cleaned up messes left by people who couldn't even show up on time. And now I'm cleaning up yours." She stared at him, breathing hard. For a second, it looked like she might keep arguing, but something shifted in her face. She realized she was out of runway. She grabbed her coat without another word and walked out the front door. No one said anything for several seconds. Then Mateo spoke. "What happens now?" Preston looked around the room. "Now, we fix this." He motioned to the team. "I've watched how hard you all work. I've seen who actually keeps this store running. And I've failed you by not knowing sooner how bad things had gotten here. That change is starting today." He turned to Mateo. "You've kept this place afloat under pressure no one should have had to deal with. If you're willing, I want you to take over as interim manager while we find a permanent solution. Full pay bump starting immediately." Mateo nodded slowly. "Okay." "Talia," Preston said, turning to the new hire. "I saw how you were treated. You didn't deserve that. No one should be made to feel small for learning. We'll get you a proper training plan, with support. You want to start fresh? You've got it." She gave a faint nod, eyes wide. "And Sean," Preston said, raising his voice a little, "shouldn't have had to push himself while sick. That will never happen again. I've contacted HR. He'll be paid for the full week, and we're covering his urgent care visit if he needs one." A quiet ripple moved through the group. Preston continued. "I'm implementing an anonymous reporting channel directly to my office, not corporate, me. If you see something wrong, you can speak up without fear." One of the baristas, a woman with dark braids, stepped forward. "Are we still expected to run short today?" "No," Preston said. "We're closing early. You've earned a break. Full pay for the shift." Another voice from the back. "What about coverage going forward? We're already short 3 people." "I'm bringing in support staff from other stores," Preston said, "and anyone who wants extra hours can volunteer. No pressure, no punishments." He paused. "We're not fixing this overnight, but we're not ignoring it anymore." The team dispersed slowly, a few heading to clean up, a few just standing still, processing. Mateo took a deep breath and started organizing the morning tasks. Preston didn't step in, he just watched. By noon, the cafe had settled into a quiet rhythm, fewer customers, more smiles. A different energy altogether. Talia was at the register again, this time with Mateo beside her, walking her through each step without raising his voice once. Preston sat at a corner table, writing notes, a list of changes, a list of questions, a reminder to himself. Never let growth become a wall between you and the people who build it. When he finally stood to leave, Mateo caught him at the door. "Thanks," he said. "For showing up?" Preston nodded. "Thanks for not waiting for someone else to fix it." Outside, the clouds were still heavy, but the air smelled cleaner. The next morning, Preston didn't return to Store 7. He was already 2 hours deep into a meeting at headquarters, seated at a long conference table with his executive leadership team. His expression was unreadable, but the tone in the room had shifted from routine to tense the moment he walked in and laid down a printed list of names. "These are the last 12 employees who left Store 7 in the past 90 days, he said, sliding the papers across the table. None of them were exit interviewed. 4 of them sent emails to HR that went unanswered. That stops now." To his right, the director of operations leaned forward cautiously. "We had no idea the situation was that volatile." Kendra's reports showed consistent performance. "Her reports were curated," Preston cut in, "and no one followed up when turnover spiked. That's a failure at every level." There was a silence. Some glanced around the table, waiting for someone else to speak. No one did. Preston continued, his voice steady. "A manager who buries problems to hit numbers is not a high performer. That mindset spreads until the culture breaks. We're not scaling dysfunction." He stood, tapped the table once, and headed for the door. "New store audits start next week, randomized, unannounced. I'll be conducting the first 3 myself." He didn't wait for a reply. That afternoon, Store 7 remained closed. A printed sign on the door read, "Temporarily closed for internal improvements, reopening Friday." Inside, the staff wasn't resting, they were rebuilding. Mateo stood behind the counter, clipboard in hand, assigning stations for the upcoming relaunch. Preston had given him clear authority, but made it clear he'd be checking in directly. It wasn't about mistrust, it was about restoring accountability without burying people in bureaucracy. Talia was organizing the pastry case, this time with a laminated guide Preston had personally requested headquarters create for new hires. Steps were broken down visually with photos, not just text. Nothing assumed, nothing rushed. She glanced up when Mateo approached. "Do you want me to cover the open tomorrow or just prep?" "You could do both," Mateo said, "but only if you're comfortable. I can run front until 10 if that helps." "I think I'd like that. I want to try the register again." He nodded. "We'll shadow you for the first hour. No pressure." In the back, 2 baristas from Store 3 brought in temporarily were helping reorganize the dry storage. Preston had asked for volunteers who were known for mentoring, not just speed. They weren't there to judge. They were there to stabilize. By Thursday afternoon, Preston returned quietly, entering through the side door. A few heads turned, but no one froze. He didn't announce himself. He walked the floor, observed the prep, and asked quiet questions. He found Mateo near the office, sorting through the schedule. "How's the rebuild going?" Mateo gave a tired but focused nod. "Better than I expected. Some shifts are still short, but the new system helps." "Any resistance from the team?" "A little, not outright, just worn down trust." "It's going to take time." Preston folded his arms. "That's fine. Rebuilding trust is a process. You don't force it. You earn it." Mateo looked up. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Why'd you come here yourself? There are 12 stores. You could have sent anyone." Preston glanced around the space, the now clean corners, the reorganized coffee bar, the small handwritten note someone had taped above the sink. "We're better when we look out for each other." "I built this place from nothing," he said, "and somewhere along the way, I stopped looking close enough. I thought systems would catch what I didn't see, but systems don't feel." "People do." Mateo nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "There's one more thing." "What is it?" "This morning, I found an old note tucked in the break room binder. Looked like it had been there for months. No name, just said, 'I wish someone up there cared.'" Preston didn't respond right away. He took the folded paper when Mateo handed it to him, read it once, then slipped it into his pocket. "I'm going to keep that," he said. Friday morning, the store reopened. Preston didn't attend. He didn't need to. His presence wasn't the point anymore. Instead, he sat in a small conference room at headquarters with the HR director and the lead from employee wellness. "We're creating a new position," he said. "Internal culture advocate. Their only job is to visit stores, talk to staff confidentially, and report directly to me." The HR director raised an eyebrow. "You want someone bypassing the usual chain?" "I want someone whose job is to listen, not manage, not enforce, just listen and relay." By midday, Store 7 was humming again, though not loudly. Customers filtered in steadily, greeted by a quieter, more grounded energy. No one barked, no one hovered. When a register froze temporarily, Talia calmly flagged it and moved to the next without panic. At the dish station, Sean returned for a half shift. He moved slower, still recovering, but every 15 minutes, Mateo checked in to make sure he was pacing himself. The first time he did, Sean looked surprised. "You're really not going to rush me?" Mateo shook his head. "Not anymore." Sean nodded, and that was that. At 3:30, a middle-aged woman in a gray coat approached the counter. She held a small coffee in one hand and a folded napkin in the other. She waited until there was no line, then addressed Talia directly. "You were here last week, right? You rang me up." Talia looked up, a little cautious. "Yes, I think so." The woman smiled gently. "You look nervous. I just wanted to say, you're doing great." Talia blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you," she said, voice quiet. Preston saw none of this, but Mateo did, and he made a mental note to pass it along. Because now, that kind of thing mattered. Back at headquarters, Preston stood by the wall of framed photos, each one a store opening day. Smiling teams, ribbon cuttings, cups held high. He'd nearly forgotten what those faces meant, what they risked to show up every day, what they gave that spreadsheets could never reflect. He reached into his pocket, unfolded the note Mateo had given him, and pinned it behind the photo of Store 7's opening, not to hide it, but to keep it close. 3 weeks later, quarterly reviews were overhauled. Staff surveys went anonymous and uncensored. Exit interviews became mandatory. And Preston personally visited every store before the end of the quarter, without warning, without title, not to catch anyone, just to see. Because the real work wasn't in the launch. It was in the follow-through.